The sun burned red above the alien market, painting the metal streets in dusty light. The air was thick with the smell of oil, roasted meat, and smoke from the nearby factories. Traders shouted from their stalls, selling glowing fruits and silverfish from other worlds. But in the middle of all the noise, one voice trembled softly. A thin alien woman stood near a food stall, her arms wrapped around a small child. Her skin, once bright blue, had turned pale from hunger. Her eyes looked tired, and her clothes hung loose on her body. The child in her arms was quiet, too quiet. His small chest moved weakly and his lips were dry. The woman looked at the stall owner, a large alien with thick gray scales and gold rings on his hands. She lowered her head and said in a shaky voice, "Please, may I have the leftovers for my child? He hasn't eaten in 3 days." The stall owner froze, then laughed loudly. "Leftovers for free? You think this is a charity?" His laughter echoed through the market. Some people nearby joined in. Others just stared, pretending not to see. The woman's eyes filled with tears. She tried again, her voice breaking. "Please, just the scraps. Anything you were going to throw away." The stall owner leaned forward and sneered. "You aliens from the lower sectors should learn your place. Begging is not allowed here. Get lost before I call the guards." The child whimpered weakly, clutching his mother's torn sleeve. She held him closer, her heart sinking. She had walked for hours to reach this market, hoping someone, anyone, would show kindness. But all she found was laughter and cruelty. And then from behind the crowd, a calm human voice said, "That's enough." The laughter stopped. Heads turned. A tall human stepped forward, his shadow falling across the stall. His name was Eli. He wore a long brown coat, dusty from travel, and his face was marked by small scars, signs of many hard days. His eyes, however, were steady and kind. He looked at the woman first, then at the stall owner. "She asked for food," he said softly, "not your money, not your pride." The stall owner glared. "Who are you to tell me how to run my stall, human?" Eli didn't answer. He reached into his bag, pulled out a few metal coins, and dropped them on the counter. "Here," he said. "Give her whatever she needs." The stall owner stared at the coins, then at Eli. "You must be new here," he growled. "Feeding beggars is against the overseer's law. You could get yourself punished." Eli's voice was calm. "Then punish me." The air grew still. The woman looked up at him, shocked. No one had ever spoken like that to an overseer's follower before. The crowd whispered among themselves, some frightened, some curious. The stall owner stepped back, not sure what to do. Eli turned toward the woman. "Come," he said gently. "Get what you need." With shaking hands, she took a small loaf of bread and a piece of dried fruit. Her eyes were full of fear, as if she expected someone to strike her. Eli nodded at her child. "Feed him." She hesitated, then tore the bread into small pieces and placed one in her child's mouth. The boy chewed slowly, as if remembering how to eat. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means." Eli smiled faintly. "I think I do." The stall owner muttered something under his breath and turned away. The crowd began to move again, pretending nothing had happened. But some eyes followed Eli with quiet respect, while others watched him with silent hate. As Eli and the woman walked away, a shadow moved at the edge of the market. A tall alien in black armor marked a symbol on a metal board, a red triangle with a single eye inside it. The mark of the overseers. The woman saw it and gasped softly. "You shouldn't have helped me," she whispered. "Now they'll come for you." Eli looked back once at the symbol, then at her. "Let them," he said. "No one should starve under the same sun." They kept walking until the market noise faded behind them. The child slept in her arms, a small smile finally appearing on his face. For the first time in days, the woman felt something she thought was gone forever. Hope. But as she looked at the human beside her, she couldn't shake the feeling that the simple act of kindness had started something much bigger, something that could change everything. And somewhere far above the smoky sky, the overseer's scanners blinked red, recording the scene. A human had interfered, and soon, the whole colony would know. The walk back to Eli's outpost was long and silent. The alien mother, Ryla, held her child tightly in her arms. The boy's small head rested on her shoulder, his breathing weak and uneven. Every step she took seemed heavy, as if the air itself pushed against her. Eli walked beside her without speaking. The narrow path cut through the dusty colony streets where broken lights flickered and walls were marked with the red triangle, the overseer's symbol of control. A few faces peeked through windows, then quickly disappeared. No one wanted to be seen helping a beggar, especially not one helped by a human. When they reached the edge of the colony, Eli opened a small metal gate and led her into his outpost. It was a simple place, half shelter, half workshop. Tools hung on the walls, a small stove glowed in the corner, and a single cot sat beside the window. "You can rest here," he said softly. Ryla hesitated. She looked around the room as if expecting a trick. You are human," she whispered, fear and confusion in her eyes. "Your kind don't live here." Eli poured water into a cup and handed it to her. "Not many do," he said, "but someone has to fix their machines." She took the cup with trembling hands and gave it to her child first. The boy's lips touched the water and a small sigh escaped him. His breathing slowed, steadier now, though still shallow. Eli knelt beside them and gently checked the boy's pulse. "He's weak," he murmured. "He needs real food, not scraps." Ryla's voice broke. "We had a home once," she said, staring at the floor. "Before the war, before the overseers came. They took everything. My mate, he was taken for labor. They said he would come back. He never did." Eli said nothing. He understood loss. He had seen it too many times on too many planets. The silence stretched between them like a quiet storm. He stood and opened a box from the shelf, pulling out a small packet of preserved food. "Eat this," he said. "Both of you." Ryla tried to refuse. "I cannot take more from you. They will punish you for this." Eli gave a small smile. "Then they'll have to find me first." The faintest laugh escaped her lips, but it was mixed with fear. "You don't understand," she whispered. "The overseers watch everything. When they see kindness, they see weakness, and weakness is not allowed." Eli stirred the small pot on the stove. "Maybe," he said slowly. "But sometimes kindness is the only thing that keeps us alive." The smell of warm food filled the small outpost. Ryla's child opened his eyes, drawn by the scent. He reached out weakly as Eli handed him a small bowl. The boy smiled for the first time. Outside, night began to fall. The red lights of the colony flickered across the dusty plains. Somewhere far away, machines hummed and drones flew past the stars. But here, in the quiet of the small room, the world felt different, warmer, softer. Ryla finally spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you help me?" Eli didn't answer right away. He stared at the dim flame of the stove, his eyes distant. "Because someone once helped me," he said finally. "When I had nothing." Ryla looked down, not knowing what to say. She could not remember the last time anyone had spoken to her without hate or disgust. The boy, now full and sleepy, curled against his mother. His small hand clutched Eli's coat. "Thank you," the child murmured softly before drifting to sleep. Eli covered them with a blanket and stood by the window. The wind outside was sharp and cold, carrying faint echoes of distant engines. He could feel eyes on him, watchers in the dark. And then he saw it, a small drone hovering far above, its red lens blinking as it scanned the outpost. Eli's jaw tightened. The overseers already knew. He turned away from the window and dimmed the light. "Rest," he said quietly. "Tomorrow will be different." Ryla's eyes closed slowly, her hand holding her child close. For the first time in many nights, she slept without fear. But Eli did not sleep. He sat by the door with his rifle across his knees, staring into the dark. He knew what was coming. The overseers didn't forgive kindness. Outside, the red eye of the drone blinked once more before vanishing into the sky. The night fell silent, but in that silence something powerful was born. Not rebellion, not war, something smaller yet stronger, hope. The night outside Eli's outpost was quiet, too quiet. The desert wind whispered against the metal walls, carrying the faint hum of distant machines. The stars above the colony were dim, hidden behind gray clouds of smoke from the factories. Inside, Ryla and her child slept soundly on the cot, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of old metal and oil. But Eli sat awake near the door, his rifle resting across his knees. He could not sleep. The image of that red drone's blinking light still burned in his mind. The overseers had seen him. They always saw everything. He stood and walked to the small window. The night was black, broken only by the faint glow of the colony towers far away. For a moment he thought he saw movement near the sand dunes, a flash of metal, a shadow shifting. He stared harder, but the darkness swallowed it again. Eli tightened his grip on the rifle. "Not tonight," he murmured. A soft sound behind him made him turn. Ryla stirred in her sleep, her hand reaching toward her child. The boy mumbled something in his alien tongue, dreaming. Eli's face softened. He had seen refugees before, soldiers, thieves, but there was something different about her. Something gentle, something strong that hunger hadn't killed. He sat back down and poured himself a small cup of water. The silence felt heavier now, pressing on his ears. Then he heard it, a faint scrape at the door. He froze. The scrape came again. Slow, careful, deliberate. Eli moved silently toward the door and peered through the small crack near the frame. At first he saw nothing. Then, as lightning flickered far off in the sky, he saw them. 3 shadows standing outside the fence line. Their armor gleamed faintly under the flash. "Overseer enforcers," he cursed under his breath. Eli turned off the stove light and moved quickly. He covered Ryla's mouth gently as she woke. Her eyes widened in fear. He whispered, "Quiet, they're here." She clutched her child close and nodded. Her body trembled, but she didn't make a sound. Outside, the enforcers began to speak in their deep, metallic voices. Eli couldn't understand all of it, but a few words reached his ears. Human, interference of property, punishment. He felt anger rise in his chest. They called her property, her and the child. He looked at the door, his hand tightening on the rifle. For a brief moment he thought of charging out, fighting them, but that would be foolish. The overseers didn't come without backup. He took a slow breath. He had to think. He had to protect them first. Eli opened a hidden hatch behind his workbench. Beneath it was a narrow crawl space that led to the dunes behind the outpost. "Ryla," he whispered, "take your boy and go down there. Follow the tunnel until you see the old wreck. Wait for me there." Her voice shook. "No, they'll kill you if they find you." He smiled faintly. "They'll have to catch me first." She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't fear, it was calm. A kind of strength she had never seen before. Ryla kissed her child's forehead and crawled into the tunnel, clutching him tightly. Before disappearing, she looked back one last time. "Eli, thank you," he nodded. "Go." When the hatch closed, the door outside burst open. The metal hinges screamed as 3 armored overseers stormed in. Their glowing visors lit the room with red light. Eli stood in the middle of the floor, rifle raised. "Evening, boys," he said quietly. One of them stepped forward. "You broke the law, human. You fed the unwanted." Eli shrugged. "Maybe I did." "She was hungry," the enforcer growled. "You'll pay for that kindness." The first shot came fast. A flash of red energy burned across the room. Eli dove behind the workbench as the wall exploded into sparks. He fired back, hitting one of them in the leg. The alien screamed and fell. The other 2 advanced. Eli rolled, grabbed a flash bomb from his belt and threw it. The small device burst into blinding light. The enforcers roared in confusion. Eli didn't wait. He ran toward the back door, leaping into the cold night. Blaster fire followed him through the darkness, but he didn't stop. He sprinted across the dunes, heart pounding, every step taking him closer to the wreck where Ryla waited. Behind him, the outpost burned, his home, his tools, everything. As the flames rose into the night sky, the overseers watched from a distance. Their leader spoke into a communicator. "The human has escaped. Begin full search. No mercy." Eli climbed the last dune and saw the faint outline of the wreck. Ryla was there, holding her child, eyes wide with relief. "You're alive," she whispered. "Barely," he said, breathing hard. "But we can't stay here. They'll keep coming." Ryla looked at the burning glow in the distance. "You risked everything for us, why?" Eli stared at the fire, his face lit by orange light. "Because no one else will." The wind howled across the dunes, carrying ashes and sparks into the night, and somewhere deep inside the colony, the overseers' machines began to wake. They were coming. Dawn came quietly, but the light was pale and cold. The desert winds had buried half of Eli's tracks during the night, but he knew the overseers would find him soon. Their machines could follow heat trails, scent patterns, even sound vibrations. There was no hiding for long. Eli sat beside the wrecked ship they had used as shelter. The metal hull was broken and rusted, half buried in the sand. Ryla sat close, her child still asleep in her arms. The boy looked better now. His breathing steady, his cheeks no longer gray, but fear still lingered in her eyes. She watched Eli check his rifle and adjust the few energy cells left. "You should leave this planet," she said softly. "Humans have ships. You can escape." Eli shook his head. "Not anymore," he said. "That outpost was my last link to the transport lanes. Once it burned, I burned with it." Ryla lowered her gaze. "Then you will die here. The overseers always come back." Eli looked at the rising sun. The golden light touched the dunes, making them shimmer like glass. "Then I'll die standing," he said quietly. For a while, they didn't speak. The only sound was the soft hum of the wind. Then Ryla broke the silence. "You don't understand this place, human. The overseers don't just rule, they erase. Anyone who helps the poor, anyone who gives hope, disappears. They will not stop until no one remembers your name." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then they'll have to erase every hungry mouth I've fed," he replied. "And every mother who still believes in mercy." Ryla looked at him for a long time. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Why do you care?" "We are not your people." He met her eyes. "Because hunger doesn't care about species. Because I've seen too many children starve while others eat in gold halls. And because—" He paused, staring at the sleeping child. "Because if I walk away, then I'm no better than them." Ryla turned away, tears glimmering in her eyes. She didn't argue again. Suddenly, the silence broke. From far away, they heard the low rumble of engines. The sound echoed across the desert like thunder. Eli stood up instantly, his rifle in hand. "They've found us." Ryla gasped and hugged her child tight. "Please, we can't fight them." Eli scanned the horizon. The sound was coming from the east. Dust clouds rose, 3 armored carriers moving fast. He quickly helped Ryla climb into the wreck. "There's a hidden space under the engine bay. Go there and don't come out until I call." "What about you?" she whispered. "I'll buy you time," he said, already checking the last of his ammunition. She wanted to stop him, to beg him to hide with them, but the look in his eyes froze her words. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. As she crawled into the dark compartment with her child, she whispered a prayer in her native tongue. The old words of protection, the same ones she used to whisper to her husband before he was taken. Eli stepped out of the wreck and stood on the sand as the vehicles approached. The ground trembled under their weight. When they stopped, a tall overseer stepped down. His armor was black and smooth, with the red triangle glowing on his chest. "Human," he said in a cold, echoing voice, "you were warned." "You broke the law." Eli didn't move. "There's no law in letting someone starve." The overseer raised his hand, showing a datapad. A red mark blinked on the screen. "You are declared a violator of order. You will be taken for punishment. Resistance will end in termination." Eli smiled faintly. "Guess we'll skip the taking part." He fired first. A burst of blue energy hit one of the soldiers square in the chest, sending him crashing into the sand. The others opened fire immediately. Explosions tore through the air, blinding light flashing across the dunes. Eli ducked behind a rock, his rifle humming hot. He fired again and again, hitting another enforcer. But there were too many. A blast struck near his shoulder, throwing him back. His rifle fell, smoking. The overseer marched forward, voice like steel. "You can't win, human." "No one ever does." Eli pushed himself up, blood running down his arm. "Maybe not," he said, breathing hard. "But someone has to try." He reached into his pocket and pressed a small detonator. A second later, the dunes behind the wreck exploded. Old fuel cells he had hidden there long ago. The fireball threw sand high into the air, covering the wreck completely. The overseers stumbled, blinded by the blast. When the smoke cleared, the wreck was gone, buried under sand and flame. Eli was gone too. The overseer stared at the burning horizon, his jaw tight. "Find the bodies," he ordered. But beneath the wreck, deep in the hidden chamber, Ryla held her child close. The explosion had sealed the entrance, but they were alive. She could still hear the faint hum of the overseers above, but they didn't know she was there. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "He saved us," she whispered. Outside, the wind howled again, carrying the smell of smoke and metal. The overseers searched the sands, finding only fire and dust, and far away beyond the dunes, a shadow limped toward the horizon. Eli, wounded but alive. He didn't look back. He couldn't. There was still work to do. Night fell again, but this time the desert sky looked like fire. Red streaks from the explosions still glowed faintly on the horizon where Eli's outpost once stood. Smoke twisted into the stars like dark fingers reaching upward. The colony slept uneasily, not knowing that something had already begun to stir beneath their metal streets. Eli limped through the wastelands, his arm wrapped in torn cloth. Each step sent pain through his body, but he kept moving. The wind stung his face and filled his coat with sand. Behind him, the overseers searched the dunes with drones, their red lights cutting through the night like eyes of demons. He had to keep away from them, at least long enough to find Ryla again. He remembered her words before he told her to hide. "They will erase you." He smiled faintly to himself. "Then they'll have to find me first." Hours passed before he reached the old freight tunnels near the colony wall, abandoned during the war. There, hidden among the shadows, were others. Starving workers, exiles, mothers with sick children. They looked at him with wide, fearful eyes. One of them whispered, "You're the human, the one who fought the overseers." Eli nodded once. "I need a place for a mother and child." "They're hiding near the southern dunes." A tall alien stepped forward, his skin dull gray and scarred. "If you brought trouble with you, we can't help," he said coldly. Eli's gaze was steady. "Trouble is already coming. You can either hide from it or stand up." For a long time there was silence. Then someone in the crowd, a young alien girl, stepped forward and handed him a small light crystal. "We'll help," she said, "because you helped us first." Eli accepted it with a quiet nod. "Then let's move before dawn." At sunrise, Ryla woke inside the wrecked ship. The air was thick with dust and the metal walls creaked from the explosion's heat. She pushed the debris aside and crawled out, clutching her child. Her body ached, but when she looked up at the desert, she froze. Far in the distance, a figure walked toward her, slow, limping, but alive. "Eli," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. She ran to him, almost falling with each step. When she reached him, she dropped to her knees. "I thought you were dead." Eli smiled faintly. "Not yet." He looked tired, covered in dust and blood, but his eyes still held that steady fire. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "We can't stay here. The overseers will come again. But I found people, your people. They're ready to fight back." Ryla looked at him in shock. "Fight back? No one fights them. We've lived under their boots for years." "Then maybe it's time someone stopped crawling," Eli said. She wanted to protest, but something in his voice silenced her. It wasn't anger, it was conviction. Later that day, they reached the tunnels. The hidden camp buzzed with quiet energy. Dozens of aliens gathered around, whispering, pointing at Eli. Some bowed their heads in respect, others in fear. Eli stood on a broken crate and spoke, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "You've lived under their rule long enough," he said. "They call you worthless. They make you fight for scraps. But look around you. You still breathe. You still care for each other. That means they haven't won." Someone shouted, "And what will your kindness bring, human? More death?" Eli looked at the crowd. "Maybe, but what has your silence brought? Hunger? Chains?" He paused. "I'm not asking you to fight for me. I'm asking you to fight for the ones who can't." The room went still. Then slowly, the scarred alien from before stepped forward and nodded. "I'll fight, then another." "Me too." And another. Soon voices rose together, soft at first, then stronger. "We fight!" Eli smiled faintly. For the first time since the war began, the colony's underground was awake. That night, they struck. Eli led a small group toward one of the overseers' food depots. The plan was simple: steal enough supplies for the refugees and send a message. Kindness was no longer a crime. They moved through the shadows like ghosts. The depot's metal walls gleamed under the moonlight, guarded by machines. Eli raised his hand, signaling silence. He slipped past the gate and hacked the control panel. Sparks flew and the gate hissed open. They rushed in. Crates of rations and water lay stacked to the ceiling. The refugees worked fast, loading supplies into stolen carts, but then an alarm blared. Red lights flashed. The overseers were coming. "Move!" Eli shouted. Blaster fire cut through the air. Sand exploded around them. One of the refugees fell, hit in the leg. Eli ran back, grabbed him, and dragged him to cover. "Go! Don't stop!" They fought their way out, the night filled with smoke and fire. When the dust cleared, the depot burned. The overseers arrived too late. The supplies were gone, and on one of the metal walls burned by plasma were words written in human script. "Hope still lives." Hours later, The refugees shared the stolen food in the tunnels. Ryla's child ate until he smiled again. She looked at Eli sitting apart, reloading his rifle in silence. "You started something," she whispered. Eli looked up, a tired smile on his lips. "No," he said softly. "You did, when you asked for leftovers." Outside, the overseer's sirens wailed in the distance, echoing across the desert. But inside the tunnels, laughter replaced fear. The first spark had become a flame, and soon the whole colony would burn with it. The flames of rebellion burned low but bright beneath the colony. In the tunnels, whispers carried faster than the wind. A human fought the overseers. A human shared food with the hungry. The story spread from one starving worker to another, until even those too afraid to hope began to lift their heads. But hope always had a price. Eli knew it well. He sat near the tunnel entrance, cleaning his rifle with slow, careful hands. His arm was wrapped in bandages made from torn cloth. Each movement made him wince, but he didn't stop. Ryla stood beside him, her face lit by the dim blue glow of a stolen lamp. Her child played nearby with other refugee children, his laughter echoing faintly in the metal corridors. For a brief moment, the sound felt like peace. "You should rest," Ryla said quietly. "You've done enough." Eli looked at her and shook his head. "Enough is when they stop hunting the weak." She frowned, worry dark in her eyes. "You can't fight them alone forever." "The overseers have armies, drones, ships," Eli interrupted softly. "And all we have is each other." "That's enough." Ryla fell silent. She didn't understand how one human could still believe in mercy when the whole galaxy had forgotten it. But deep inside, a small part of her wanted to believe too. Above them, in the overseer's command tower, alarms glowed red. A dozen officers stood around a large holographic map, showing the tunnels below. The human's face flickered on one of the screens. Designation: Eli Voss. Former engineer, Human Colony Sector 9. Status: Rogue. The overseer commander's metallic voice echoed in the chamber. "He spreads hope. Hope is the seed of rebellion. Destroy the seed." Orders were given. Within hours, ships took flight from the tower, sleek black machines cutting through the clouds. Their engines screamed like thunder. The raid was coming. Deep underground, Eli and the refugees heard it before they saw it. The walls trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Somewhere far down the tunnels, an explosion roared, shaking the ground. "They've found us," someone shouted. Panic spread instantly. Mothers grabbed their children. Men grabbed tools and weapons, though few had real guns. Eli stood and shouted above the noise, "Everyone to the west tunnel! Move now!" Ryla hesitated, holding her child. "Eli, come with us." "I will," he said, loading the rifle. "Just get them out." She didn't move. "You can't." "Ryla, go." His voice was sharp, but his eyes were gentle. "They need you alive." She nodded, tears burning in her eyes, and ran toward the others. Eli turned to face the tunnel entrance as the sound of boots echoed closer. Lights flashed in the smoke. The overseers were coming. The first wave entered fast, drones hovering, weapons glowing red. Eli fired without hesitation. The rifle cracked again and again, each shot finding a target. Sparks flew, machines fell, but more poured in behind them. The air filled with heat and light. Metal screamed as the walls shattered. Eli fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Each breath was a promise to the people behind him. "I will hold them as long as I can." A blast struck near him, throwing him to the ground. His head hit the metal floor hard. The world spun. He could hear shouting, crying, explosions, then Ryla's voice, faint but desperate. "Eli! Eli, get up!" He blinked through the smoke. She had come back. She stood at the edge of the chaos, clutching her child in one arm and a broken metal rod in the other. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped. "And leave you to die alone?" She shouted over the roar. He wanted to argue, but another explosion shook the tunnel. They both ducked behind a fallen beam. Ryla looked at him, eyes full of fear and anger. "You can't save everyone." Eli met her gaze. "Maybe not," he said. "But someone has to try." Together they fought. Eli firing, Ryla striking at the drones that slipped through. The noise was deafening, the heat unbearable. Then from behind the smoke, a massive overseer enforcer stepped forward, towering above them. "Enough," it growled. "The human dies now." Eli raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the enforcer shot first. The blast hit him square in the chest, throwing him backward. Ryla screamed. She fell to her knees beside him, holding his face in her trembling hands. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes were calm. "Don't stop," he whispered. "Promise me you'll keep them safe." She nodded through her tears. "I promise," he smiled faintly. "Good." Then with one final breath, Eli pressed a small detonator into her hand. The overseer stepped closer, unaware. Ryla looked at the device and understood. When the overseer reached them, Eli's last act came to life. A bright explosion tore through the tunnel, swallowing everything in white light. Hours later, smoke still drifted from the ruins. The overseers retreated, leaving behind only ashes. But from the wreckage, survivors crawled out, Ryla among them, carrying her child. She was burned, bruised, but alive. She looked back once at the destroyed tunnel, the place where the human had made his stand. "He kept his word," she whispered. "He gave them hope." Her child tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, will we see him again?" Ryla smiled sadly. "Maybe. In the stars." They walked toward the horizon where the sun began to rise again. The war wasn't over, but something far greater had begun, and in every whisper, every firelight story told that night, one name was spoken with honor: Eli, the human who gave hope. The sun rose over the desert like a soft fire, painting the sands gold and red. Smoke still drifted from the tunnels where the last battle had taken place. The ground was quiet now. No more gunfire, no more shouting, only the low hum of wind moving through twisted metal and broken stone. From the ruins, survivors began to emerge one by one. Their faces were covered in dust and tears, their clothes torn, but their eyes, those eyes were alive. They had seen something the overseers never expected, a human who stood against them, not for power, not for profit, but for compassion. Ryla carried her child in her arms as she climbed out of the tunnel. The boy clung to her neck, sleepy and scared. Behind her, others followed, workers, widows, and orphans who had survived the raid. The desert stretched wide before them, endless and harsh. She turned back one last time. Smoke rose where Eli had made his final stand. The sand had covered most of the debris, but she could still see part of his coat, burned and torn, half buried under rubble. The sight made her chest tighten. She knelt and whispered, "You kept your promise, Eli. You gave us hope." Her child tugged on her sleeve and pointed at the sky. "Mama, look!" Above them, the clouds glowed faintly orange, not from fire, but from sunlight breaking through. It was the first sunrise the colony had seen in weeks, free from the shadow of the overseer's patrol ships. Ryla smiled faintly. "Yes, my love, look, the sun still rises." Days passed. The overseers tried to restore their control, but something had changed. The people no longer bowed their heads. The tunnels that once hid fear now echoed with quiet rebellion. At night, the refugees gathered around small fires and told the story of the human. They spoke of how Eli Voss, the outcast from the upper sectors, gave food to a starving mother and her child, how he faced the overseers without fear, how his final act destroyed the soldiers who came to silence him. Children listened with wide eyes, whispering his name like a secret prayer. Eli, the protector. Some said his spirit still walked the dunes at night, watching over them. Others believed he had become part of the stars, that every flicker in the sky was a reminder of his promise. No one should starve under the same sun. Ryla and her child eventually settled in one of the hidden camps beyond the colony's edge. The people had begun rebuilding, turning old machines into homes, broken drones into tools, scraps into hope. Her son, now stronger, played near the fire with other children. He carried a small piece of Eli's burned coat tied around his wrist. When anyone asked, he said proudly, "It's from the human who saved us." Ryla worked alongside others, teaching them how to filter water and grow food in the sand. She was quiet most days, but every night before sleep, she told her son the same story, the story of the human who heard a mother's plea in the market. And each time she told it, the boy listened as if hearing it for the first time. "Mama," he asked one night, "why did the human help us? We weren't his people." Ryla smiled softly. "Because kindness doesn't ask who you are, my son. It only asks what you need." The boy nodded thoughtfully. "Then I'll help others too." Her eyes filled with tears. That's all he ever wanted. Months later, a strange light appeared in the sky, a human rescue ship responding to distress signals from the colony. When the new crew landed, they found the camps thriving. Humans and aliens worked side by side. The overseer's banners were gone, replaced by hand-carved signs that read, "The hungry shall eat. The weak shall stand. Hope still lives." A young officer asked one of the children, "Who started all this?" The boy smiled, pointing toward the horizon. "A man named Eli. He fed my mother when no one else would." The officer lowered his head respectfully. "Then humanity should be proud." Ryla watched from afar, her eyes wet but her heart calm. She didn't speak, but inside her, a quiet voice whispered, "He didn't die in vain." That night, as the camp lights flickered beneath the stars, Ryla stood outside her tent and looked toward the desert. The wind was warm, carrying the scent of dust and fire. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure in the distance, a tall man in a brown coat standing against the sunrise. He didn't speak. He just smiled, nodded once, and faded into the golden light. Ryla closed her eyes and whispered, "Goodbye, Eli." The next morning, her son woke early and climbed a dune to watch the sun rise again. He raised his hand toward the light and whispered his own small vow. "I'll make you proud, human." The wind answered him softly, carrying his words across the desert like a promise. And somewhere far above, among the stars, a faint blue light blinked once, like a heartbeat that never stopped. Humanity's spark lived on. It began with a plea for leftovers, and ended with the birth of hope.